Good evening. San Dimas City Council and Planning Commission study session will come to order. Madam Secretary, would you read the roll? I'm sorry, Madam City Clerk.
We're going to do Pledge Allegiance first?
No, it's not on my list. We'll do the Pledge of Allegiance during the regular council meeting.
Okay. I just lost my train of thought. Councilmember Bertone.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Weber.
Here?
Councilmember Ebner.
Present.
Councilmember Viana.
Here.
Mayor Bedar.
Here.
Chair Bratt.
Here.
Commissioner Davis. Commissioner Green.
Here.
Commissioner Ross.
Here.
Commissioner Molina. Record will show that all 5 council members are in attendance. Commissioner Molina from the Planning Commissioner is absent.
We're called to oral communications. Members of the audience are invited to address the City Council on any item on this agenda. Under the provisions of the Brown Act, the legislative body is prohibited from taking or engaging in discussions on any item not appearing on the posted agenda. However, your concerns may be referred to staff or set for discussion at a later date. Each speaker will be limited to 3 minutes. Do we have any speakers?
Mayor, council member, and commissioners, there's a Nader Saman in the audience wishing to speak on the 501 East Baseline project.
Good evening. My name is Nader Saman. I'm an architect of a proposed project of subdivision of 9 lots at 501 East Baseline. I believe it went through one hearing or one study session here. One time it didn't get any approval, and it was kind of returned back to the planning department. And there is another chance to have another study session on it. So I want to just make a brief introduction of what happened with this project. That the owner, when he acquired these 2 properties, they were not used for horses, and he wanted to better utilize those 2 lots, that they are extremely large lots and underutilized, and without any undue hardship or inconvenience to anyone, because the properties were not used for horses. And he has a passion for developing high quality residential units. And that goes very well with the direction of the state of solving the housing problem in the state. We are aware that they are taking drastic measures to solve this housing problem, including splitting standard size lots into 2 smaller areas, allowing 3 units on each small lot, and eliminating garages. Definitely that's going to compromise on the quality of life, and it's not going to be beneficial to the community. And I think for us, I believe that could be prudent to have control on our planning concept and do our own planning, which could benefit the community. And here we are just adding additional residential units that we're asking to have maybe entertain a variance process on these 2 lots rather than the first proposal by the planning department of changing or having a zone amendment for the entire agricultural zone area. that's not going to sit well with the equestrian community. So if we are allowed to have a variance for just subdividing these 2 lots and have this project as kind of experimental pilot project to see how the community will receive it, and if that's going to be accepted and will be considered for the benefit of the community, for the healthy growth and well-being of the community.
Great, thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak to the council concerning this matter? Staff?
All right. Mayor, council members, planning commissioners. So we are back with the 501, 509 East Baseline subdivision. Per council's recommendation, we did go to the equestrian committee to get their opinion on the project. I know Councilmember Weber was in that meeting with us. So on the 8th, we presented basically the exact same PowerPoint we presented to you. And after discussion, the equestrian committee unanimously recommended to not approve the project. So we are back with that information. The rest of the project has not changed, so we're back to just continue the discussion on the project.
Okay. Any questions?
Oh, just one question. If the general plan amendment and the zoning amendment were to proceed, what is the area that we are considering? Because I know we had talked a little bit about expanding that area.
Let me grab it, I forgot to get.
Okay.
And this is not a new PowerPoint, this is the exact same one you saw last time, which is why we didn't present it. It's just here for reference. So the area that we were recommending for general plan and zoning change so as not to spot zone the properties were all of the single family very low, the SFA 16,000 lots, between the commercial properties just off San Dimas Canyon and basically all the way over to Dixie Drive on the north side of Baseline.
And Dixie Drive, I'm seeing that it's the same yellow color as along Cheyenne. Is it already zoned SF75 or?
Those are already, all the yellow properties along Dixie, all of the properties to the south of Baseline and along Cheyenne Drive are already zoned SF 7500. So what we were doing is kind of creating a contiguous zone.
Right.
With the proposal.
Thanks for that, Ken. And the reason I asked that question for the City Council and the audience and the Planning Commission is that changing, because I think what we're saying is that that's all SFA, what, 16,000 now or something like
Correct.
that? Okay. And aren't there other properties with the same SFA 16,000 to the west of Dixie Drive?
Yes.
I think there are. And so if we're going to be making this major change to rezone this equestrian property, I think that we should, if we're going to proceed, the proposal should include, I'm not saying I'm in favor of this, but I'm just saying the proposal should include, so we see the big picture, the entire north side of Baseline, you know, from wherever that is, San Dimas Avenue, all the way over to San Dimas Canyon, just because even this part I would call a piecemeal approach, even though you've expanded it to that area there. But I think this is such a change, such a momentous change that it should include analysis of the entire area that's SFA now, if that is the direction Planning Commission and Council would want to take.
Well, partially we have presented that to council. We did present at another study session earlier last year, we have another project on Cherokee that is looking to move forward with a rezoning and general plan amendment to SF 7500. That one was not as controversial because although those are SFA 16,000 lots, they're none wide enough to be used for horse keeping. So when we are rezoning those, we're actually correcting some non-conforming parcels, rezoning some SFA parcels, But because those couldn't be used for horse keeping to begin with, the council recommended, or council said we should move forward with that one. This was on the other side, and it would create a contiguous zone all the way down to Walnut.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Any further questions from council?
I'm sorry.
Since you finished.
So my understanding was, through the discussions that we had last time, were that potentially if we were to change to SF 7500, even if it were just on that one single lot, that due to the zoning with horses, we wouldn't, essentially, the lots would be so close to the property line, or the houses would be so close to the property line, that it would make, at least on one lot, maybe both on either side, it would make it nearly impossible to actually have a stable in the future if somebody were to acquire those properties and want to do that. Is that correct?
That's correct. We would really not recommend just doing a single parcel or the two as it is. That's spot zoning. There is a history in California of spot zoning being used for the wrong purposes. It is looked down upon by the state and most planning agencies. But what you're referring to is if we did turn this into lots along here and along here, the horse keeping corrals have to be 80 feet from any residence, any habitable structure. So that would basically, if you had houses here, you would have a bubble like this where corrals could not be placed in the future. Any existing corrals, we would make the applicant work with those to be 80 feet off the corrals, but we can't force him to be 80 feet from something that doesn't exist. So yes, that could create a situation where even though these were SFA properties, you would not be able to keep horses on them because of the 80 feet requirement.
And as of right now, if somebody were to acquire one of those without the proposed development, they would be able to resume keeping horses on those properties at this point?
Correct, because it's not resuming as far as, I mean, you can start new horse keeping.
Gotcha.
So there's no, I mean, it's a conforming use at this point as long as the lots meet the size, which these all do.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Davis?
Thanks. Just so I'm clear, because I like John's idea of looking at the big picture, but you're saying the big picture is changing anyway, that there is not going to be horse keeping, or that's...
Well, here's the zoomed out a little bit, and what Councilmember Ebner is referring to is these along here, I believe, if that was...
Yes, and since I last said that if we're doing it, we should just continue on, all the way to whatever's still SFA 16,000 between there and San Dimas Avenue, actually. And I know some aren't SFA 16,000, but...
And we are already looking at rezoning these. These along here are built to SF 7500 standards. They're too small for horses to begin with. These two lots here, we do have a proposed development that should be, last I talked to the applicant, he was looking to submit sometime quickly, and those will be subdivided. These lots here are too narrow. There's no way to keep horses on those and to keep 80 feet from these properties. And these are actually non-conforming lots. So they are zoned SFA 16,000, but they are built to SF 7500 standards.
Right.
So as part of a proposal we came with, we were looking at rezoning all of these to SF 7500 because it just made sense.
The yellow lots in the middle there are already zoned SF 7500, or are they
Correct.
just non-conforming? They are zoned.
These are already SF 7500 lots. So this is like a little, they created a pocket here, and then this was the remnant along baseline.
What street do they fit on the lots?
Forget what the cul-de-sac is. This is, no, that's Cherokee, sorry. This is Dixie and Walnut.
But just, it would be east of Dixie, what's the next street?
Over here is San Dimas Canyon. There is no other street between here. Yeah.
Well, Dixie,
Those lots look like they're landlocked.
well, Dixie is a street. It's just that remnant that is, this one little remnant that is not a San Dimas street.
It's a private street. That's why that's why the lots go over the street.
But if you're going to Cosmos from where I live, that's the street you take, with all of its bumps and the speed bump they put in there, which is their own doing and everything else.
Right. Any other questions from the commission? Margie?
Yeah, I live in horse property up on Maverick. I have a neighbor across the street that has 2 horses in his yard. And behind him, another neighbor has 2 horses. Now, what if he were to change his horse stalls into an ADU? Would that mean that the other neighbor would have to get rid of her horses because it would be within 80 feet? How does that affect it? I just want a little clarification on this.
So it's a chicken and the egg scenario. Whatever comes first is the use we'll allow.
Okay.
So because the horse is already there, if the neighbor wanted to put an ADU on the property, they would have to meet the 80 feet requirement. Because that's health code, the horses are established, we could make the ADU move 80 feet from the corral. For a property that doesn't have anything, they would be prevented from putting a horse stall within 80 feet of the ADU. So whatever comes first is the established use. The properties around them have to abide by that.
And if they were to sell the property, that would still leave it as horse property?
Well, the horse property,
If it was there first?
because the horse, it's not attached to a sale, it's attached to the actual property as is per the zoning. So any property that is SFA 16,000 could possibly keep horses.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. No other questions? Any comments?
I'd be interested to hear from planning before we have our discussions.
Sure. I mean, what we're deciding right now is to whether we want to study this or not, right, and move it forward. We're trying to decide whether this is a slam dunk, we're not going to approve it, we might as well not look at it, or it has some merit to be looked at and we should move it forward into the regular process of public hearing.
In essence, correct.
In the rest of it, so we can hear from the neighbors and we can hear from everybody else.
Because these are not noticed meetings, because this is not a
Right,
public hearing.
Right, so this is just like if, don't waste your money because you'll never get through kind of discussion, right?
It's a way to gauge your opinion and the council's commission to
Right,
see if the
okay.
applicant stood a chance.
For the applicant, okay. Well, I don't see how we cannot consider it, right? It just seems to me that, and I understand we love horses and we want to do all of that. We've got other competing priorities. It just seems to me that this is worth studying in that we ought to move it forward, and it does have an opportunity for approval, although I don't know what'll happen when we go out to the public, whether we're going to get a lot of negative comments or not. I just you don't know until you go out there. So my view is, this makes sense to look at.
Any further comments?
I'm not going to beat a dead horse, but I agree with John and John. I think it's time that we look at that entire area all the way over to San Dimas Avenue about rezoning. And again, all I would recommend is that we continue with the process. I wouldn't necessarily say that, as John said, a slam dunk, but I think it certainly makes sense because everything south of baseline, my way of thinking, is residential and not horse property. And it makes sense to take this property that's there and get more viable lots out of the process. So.
And if I could, I would like to clarify, because Councilmember Weber, we brought this up at the Equestrian Committee too. This will not cause anybody with horses to lose that use. It would make it non-conforming. They wouldn't have to cease, just no property would be allowed to add it if we rezone.
Marty?
Yeah, I'll just have to say, in my area, probably out of, I don't know how many homes are up there, about 60 maybe, and we probably only have about 4 homes that do have horses. It's such an expensive thing, and not as many people have horses nowadays as they used to. So, yes, I would kind of like to take another look at it. Is there any count on how many horses are in that area that we're talking about changing?
We don't have a number of horses. We do know that the only property where we can tell that there is active horse keeping is the one immediately to the west.
Okay. I drove around and looked, and I saw a lot of horse trailers, RVs, all sorts of equipment there. It looked more like a parking lot, an RV parking lot, than it did, horses, but I couldn't see horses. But, yeah, I would like to look into it a little bit more. I think it would be fair.
Mr. Ross?
I agree, and I understand the desire to hold on to property for the horses. I will say, we have a stable over in Cooking and Hills Road. The number of horses that are boarded there has diminished greatly over the years. So this may be the only section of the city left that potentially holds on to that type of acreage.
I just thought of one other thing. On Baseline, down on West Baseline, don't remember the number, but there's a housing development that went in probably 20 years ago, and the houses are not zoned for horses, but they do have a horse stable, sort of like a community pool. They have a community corral, and I noticed by driving by that they do have, I saw at least 2 horses there, probably 25 homes in that area. But I thought that was rather a clever idea of building a stable, a community stable, like the community pool. I'm not sure what their, CC&Rs are or anything like that, but that is a possibility too. Thank you.
All right. Any further? We'll bring it back to the council. Dennis?
Well, the only thing I have to say is that we're still considered a horse community, even though, as you say, it's diminished. And I'm opposed to anything that gets rid of any horse-keeping property. Basically, I mean, pretty soon we might as well just get rid of our horse paths and everything. And we do have an equestrian commission, and I think that shows that we have some interest. We own our own stable, and that shows an interest. There's not very much left.
I agree with Councilmember Bertone. I think that this is one of the last places in the community that offers this ability. I think there was another project north of Foothill that offered that. The Equestrian Commission made a recommendation, and council threw that to the wind and went with different zoning. I'm not going to support any zone change to jeopardize any further equestrian capable property. And I don't, in fact, agree with the zoning immediately to the west, the SF 7500. I think that whole area should be preserved as it's closest to the equestrian center that the city has, the trail systems and everything else. So I understand the use is dwindling, and I understand all of those things, but I also have knowing people that have horses who are going out to Norco to do everything that they're doing in Fontana, and really just wish there was more opportunity and more inventory for houses that provided the space to do it. So I understand the necessity for housing. I think there's other places and spaces that will meet those requirements. I could support SF a 20,000 rezoning in this area, no problem, or leave it the same, but I'm not going any less.
All right.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think there might be a way that I could get on board with potentially rezoning that particular area, tract of land, to not only allow the current owner to develop it and provide more housing, but to also enhance the equestrian uses, not only on that particular piece of property, but not impact any of the surrounding neighbors or potential future owners that may be interested in acquiring a pretty unique piece of property that's rare in this area nowadays.
I, too, would agree with those sentiments. The one idea that's actually kind of a good idea is that if we were going to rezone, and Margie mentioned it, you'd have to assemble a lot of property. and then do a project, and you would have a central stables, like Margie was talking about, on West Baseline, because at least then, and I know some people who own the horses in that area, and speaking about knowing people, I've talked to people who would like to, who have talked about the desirability of San Dimas as being a place they could move to and have horses. Because as Ryan and others have mentioned, now you're going out to Norco, you're going out to Fontana, you're going out to, it's just going, and so you can't have what I would call the best of both worlds, equestrian property with the proximity to LA and everything else that we have. And so yeah, and I stand by saying that if we were even to consider it, we just want to, it's like a mini general plan, right? So I don't know when we're going to do the general plan again, but we should include as much area as possible so we really can tell what the impacts are, which would basically be wiping out an area of equestrian use. And I think everybody on the council might be amenable to adopting some kind of policy on the equestrian lots, and even rezoning to SFA 20,000 so that they are more, they're actually usable. I don't know how many lots the applicant could get out of those two pieces of property and still have room for horses on each and every one of those lots. That is, maybe it's 3, maybe it's only 2. I don't know.
We do know.
Oh,
well, there's two things here, though. He can rezone that per his current zoning and get probably 5 lots. They would not be horse-keeping lots. They don't have to be by our code. So he would be able to build the houses. It would still wipe out equestrian uses on those 3 probably. And it would be done under current zoning.
And that's where we need to really figure out what our policy is going to be. Because if you're saying he could do that right now, I think a lot of the council are saying, we don't want that to be something he could do. We want to keep it so that horse keeping is available on every property that's resulting from the lot split and on all the surrounding lots. So whatever that policy is, I think that soon we should have a discussion about that kind of policy and what changes it would entail.
I agree with that, and I think that in an item in the council meeting to follow, there's a guardian of the forest type of thing, and perhaps we need guardians of the equestrian interest. But I think there is a time, I think, for the city to have this discussion, because these lots are literally, I don't want to say kicking a dead horse again, but, literally the lots are disappearing, and it's sad. I mean, it's very sad. I mean, talking to people that have horses, they literally have a handful of lots to even consider if they want to upgrade their home. I mean, if they want to move to something bigger or larger from where they are. I mean, it's kind of interesting. People that own horses don't usually just have one. And especially if they've got a family and they have kids, they want to grow. And so there is no inventory, there is no process other than going to the stables, which is usually what it sounds like happens for some of those people. So I agree with Councilman Ebner.
I have a question. The equestrian center there on Via Verde near the park and ride in the freeway, that's not in San Dimas, is it? No. Is
No.
it LA County?
Yep.
I believe it's LA County.
So that's LA County, okay.
All right. Well, as recent as 2 hours ago, I talked with some folks that were very much opposed to this rezoning, and the interest was real simple. There's not much left. We consider ourselves a western town, but we really don't tout it anymore, other than people conversing about it. And to believe it or not, and it's one of those things that things out, residential areas are out away from San Dimas right now, very close to the borders and stuff. They're actually closing down some of their stables and stuff, and these people are moving back towards San Dimas to try to find places to store their house or their horses and to look at residents and stuff. So I agree with the entire council, the fact that this is not something that right now I believe that I could get behind in rezoning it. So I guess we'll call for a motion.
I would move that we take no action on this item.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none, motion to deny is passed 5-0. Chris?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to raise one issue because Commissioner Green brought this up, and I know the answer that staff provided regarding the chicken and the egg, whether a stable was in place before the housing and whatnot. If we fast forward to a situation where a complaint comes in and code enforcement is inspecting, they're going to go back to the code and rely on the code in terms of what they're going to enforce. And the way I read the code, it doesn't make it very clear that a determination that stables were there before a housing property or an ADU went into place. And so anytime we're going to make these kind of changes, I'd like to ask that we be very explicit and either change the code to reflect the fact that if I put an ADU within the 80 feet or 80 feet of what is existing horse property next door, it should be very explicit as to whether do the horses have to move now that I have the housing, or do the horses stay? And that needs to be codified somewhere so we're not enforcing the code two different ways.
I move that we initiate a municipal code text amendment based off of the issue you just raised and bring back the relevant language to be able to encapsulate the essence of what the council's direction and comments were regarding this matter.
I would second that. Can I add to it or comment on it? So I agree. And I think we should, when we discuss that, I don't know if we could also discuss just the sort of other aspects of the policy. All the distances, are they ones that we have in place because we put them in place, or are they county requirements? These are just some we know the answer to, but they're all things that we should discuss so we can really get a handle on, is that 80 feet the distance we need to have? And any other things attendant to it, like it's zoned SFA 16,000. It's this horribly long, skinny piece of property, and yet it's backing up against the 70 single-family homes, so there's no chance of having horses on that property. How far do we want to go? Do we want to, retain that as SFA 16,000?
So I'll accept the amendment in the context of saying that broadly that we're going to do the municipal code text amendment, and then also bring back the issues.
Various issues. Any attendant issues to.
Right. City attorney looks like he's.
Well, I was just going to say we will only need 2 council votes on that because it's a request for a future agenda item, so we don't need to vote.
And it would relate to Chapter 18.28.040, which is the conditions of keeping of horses on SF8.
Well, yeah, let's revisit that and all that goes with it.
All right. Any further comments?
No, I just think it's good to look at the entire plan. I mean, since we're gradually getting rid of most of our horse property, let's figure out where it is and what we want to keep and what we don't want to keep. So that's a good idea.
All right. Okay. Oral communications. Members of the audience, speakers are limited to 3 minutes, or as may be determined by the chair. Anyone wishing to speak to the council and the commission? Seeing none, we'll adjourn until the regular council meeting at 7 o'clock.